This has been done specifically for a job. I think I'm going back to black.
Royal blood, Chanel sparkle, Vogue covers, and an unexpected suicide. This is the story of Stella Tennant An, just saying that gives you chills, doesn't it? Because in Stella Tennant's life, there was both the fairy tale magic of aristocracy and the blinding lights of the fashion world. But at the end of all that glamour came a dark, shocking twist no one saw coming. How? How did a woman once celebrated as the perfect aristocratic supermodel end up with such a tragic ending? To understand that, we have to rewind all the way back to her childhood. Stella Tennant was born on December 17, 1970. In northern England, inside a sprawling estate that looked like it had been pulled from the pages of history. And it wasn't just for show. She really was born into aristocracy. Her mother, Lady Emma Cavendish, came from one of Britain's noble families. Her grandmother was a countess closely connected to the royal family. In other words, Stella entered the world with the kind of lineage most people only read about in magazines. Her childhood was anything but ordinary. She grew up running through vast gardens, riding horses, and living in the kind of lifestyle that screamed upper class. But here's the twist. Stella herself never quite felt like she belonged in that world. Even as a child, she was shy, quiet, and a little rebellious. Friends would later describe her as too serious for her age. Imagine it being a little kid. And already everyone expects you to be graceful, proper, and behave like you're part of royalty. Can you picture the pressure? For Stella, that weight was there from the very beginning. In school, she turned her focus toward art and sculpture. Modeling? Fashion? None of that was on her radar. She wanted to use her hands, create, draw, and make things. She once joked to her friends, "I could never be a model, I'm way too shy." And honestly, she believed that, but fate has a funny way of proving us wrong. In the early 1990s, Stella posed for a friend's photography project. Those pictures, casual as they were, ended up catching the eye of people in the fashion industry. Why? Because Stella looked completely different from the era's typical models. She was tall, slender, with sharp, aristocratic features, but it wasn't just her looks. It was the aura. She had this icy, distant vibe that the fashion world craved, and just like that, doors opened. Suddenly, this shy aristocrat who wanted to be an artist was on her way to Vogue covers and the world's biggest catwalks. Here's what's wild. Stella Tennant never played the supermodel role the way others did. From day one, she stood apart. She wasn't bubbly or overly glamorous. She was quiet, mysterious, and almost indifferent. And that "I don't really care" attitude? It made her unforgettable. In her own words, "I fell into modeling by accident." And it's true. She never chased the spotlight. It found her. Her friends had submitted her photos to agencies almost as a joke, but the agencies weren't laughing. They told her, "You're exactly the face we've been looking for. Think about that for a second." A girl who grew up in castles, who wanted nothing more than to sculpt and live quietly, was suddenly walking runways in front of the world. Coincidence? Or destiny? So let me throw the question to you. Was it her aristocratic roots that made Stella Tennant so special? Or was it her aloof, mysterious vibe? Or maybe it was the perfect mix of both. What's certain is this. Stella Tennant's story was never going to be just another model's story. From the very beginning, she was set apart, carrying both privilege and mystery. In the next chapter, we'll dive into how Stella Tennant went from accidental model to the face of Vogue, how she caught Karl Lagerfeld's eye, and how she became one of Chanel's most iconic muses. Because the road from aristocratic estates to the fashion world's front lines was shorter and more dramatic than anyone could have imagined. For Stella Tennant, modeling really did start by accident, but the results? Anything but small. In 1993, a few casual portraits of her quickly caught the attention of top modeling agencies in the UK. At the time, the fashion world was full of glossy, sexy, and glamorous faces. But Stella Tennant broke that mold completely. Her tall frame, razor-sharp cheekbones, short-cropped hair, and aristocratic aura said one thing loud and clear: "I'm different." And that difference was exactly what the fashion world was craving in 1993. Stella Tennant made her debut in British Vogue just months earlier. She was studying art and planning a career in sculpture. Suddenly, she was splashed across the pages of one of the most important fashion magazines in the world. That was just the beginning. Because in the same year, legendary photographers like Steven Meisel and Mario Testino started working with her. Her rise was fast, and Vogue covers became her launchpad. In the early 90s, landing a Vogue cover wasn't just a big deal, it was the ultimate stamp of approval. And Stella didn't just appear once. She became one of the magazine's most recognizable faces. She wasn't just another pretty girl. She was shaping up to be an icon. Funny how fashion works, right? Sometimes it doesn't reward perfect beauty. Sometimes it rewards difference. And Stella Tennant was living proof of that, but the real turning point came when she caught the eye of Karl Lagerfeld. As Chanel's creative director, Karl had been steering the house for years, and he had a sixth sense for spotting unique faces. The moment he saw Stella, he knew she was the one. Bringing Stella Tennant into Chanel's campaigns and runway shows shocked the industry. Chanel was a brand built on timeless elegance and aristocratic refinement. And here was Stella embodying that spirit in real life. She wasn't just modeling Chanel. She was Chanel by 1996, when Stella walked as a lead model in a Chanel runway show. It was official, she had become Karl's muse. Her long, willowy silhouette, her cool, untouchable vibe, combined with his designs, created magic. The press couldn't stop talking. Fashion writers gushed. Aristocratic elegance has been reborn at Chanel. And it wasn't just runways. Photographers adored her. Magazines fought to feature her. That blank, mysterious stare, almost cold, but deeply magnetic, was perfect for fashion photography. Soon, Stella Tennant was counted among the 90s supermodels. She joined the ranks of Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Claudia Schiffer, Linda Evangelista, and Christy Turlington. The press dubbed them the Big Six, but within that circle, Stella stood out. She wasn't the bubbly one, the sexy one, or the all-American one. She was the icy aristocrat, the mysterious muse. Here's the kicker. Stella never fully bought into the supermodel hype. In interviews, she often said, "I see this as temporary work." For her, modeling wasn't her whole identity. It was just one chapter in her life, and ironically, that attitude only made her more fascinating. While other supermodels were chasing fame and spotlight, Stella kept her distance, her cool. And that distance? That mystery? It only amplified her allure. Think about it. Karl Lagerfeld, a man who thrived on glamour and drama, declared Stella Tennant the face of Chanel. And yet, she treated modeling almost like a side gig. Isn't that wild? That contradiction is exactly what made her story so unique. In the next chapter, we'll dive into her peak years, those unforgettable runway moments, her role in shaping the fashion trends of the 90s, and the deeper connection she shared with Lagerfeld. Because Stella Tennant wasn't just another Chanel model, she was a true icon who defined an era. The mid to late 1990s marked the peak of Stella Tennant's career. By then, she wasn't just the aristocratic girl who had stumbled into modeling, she had become a global fashion icon. Her runway walk, her piercing expressionless gaze, and her partnership with Karl Lagerfeld at Chanel created moments that are now part of fashion history. In 1996, at Chanel's Haute Couture show, Stella walked as the lead model in a collection that celebrated modern aristocracy. When she appeared on the runway, the audience held its breath. Her tall frame, sharp features, and icy aura transformed Chanel's elegance into something living, almost sculptural. The next day, fashion headlines screamed, "Stella Tennant embodied the spirit of Chanel." This was Stella's prime. She wasn't just working with Chanel. She was walking for Versace, Alexander McQueen, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Hermes, you name it. Yet despite all those names, she would always be most closely tied to Chanel. Because her aristocratic roots and natural refinement mirrored the timeless spirit of the brand in a way few others ever could. Think about it. The 90s supermodels were known for their bold energy and charisma. Naomi Campbell was fierce and fiery. Cindy Crawford embodied American allure. Claudia Schiffer was the classic blonde bombshell. And Stella? She was the opposite, reserved, cold, mysterious, and captivating. Karl Lagerfeld himself once said in an interview, "She's not just a model. She's the living proof of Chanel's aristocratic side." And honestly, That one line perfectly explains her place in fashion history. But Stella's influence went beyond the runway. Throughout the 90s, she graced the covers of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Elle over and over again. Her photographs became iconic because her face carried two extremes at once: a cold, statuesque stillness and a subtle emotional depth. That paradox was exactly what photographers craved. Here's the funny part. Sometimes a model's allure isn't in her smile, it's in her refusal to smile. And Stella Tennant embodied that perfectly. Her impact on 90s fashion trends was undeniable. It was the decade of minimalism, sharp lines, and black and white contrasts. Stella's understated yet aristocratic presence helped shape the mood of the era. Younger models tried to emulate her style, but no one could quite capture that same icy magic. She also broke ground in another way. Stella brought androgyny into high fashion with her cropped hair, angular features, and masculine tailoring. She showed that a model didn't need to be traditionally sexy or sweet to succeed. You could be aloof, powerful, and even a little intimidating and still be irresistible. Her relationship with Karl Lagerfeld only deepened during this time. While not romantic, it was a true muse-artist connection. Karl trusted Stella to open his shows, star in his campaigns, and embody his creative vision. And she delivered every single time. By the late 90s, the press had given her a nickname, the cool aristocrat. That label stuck because it summed her up perfectly. Always slightly distant, always mysterious, and always unforgettable. And yet, despite all the fame, Stella stayed grounded. In interviews, she often talked about her family, her love of art, and her desire for a normal life beyond fashion. For her, the runway was a stage, but it was never her whole life. In the next chapter, we'll peel back the glamorous curtain and look at the other side of Stella Tennant's story, her struggles with depression, the quiet battles behind the spotlight, and the delicate balance she tried to keep between her family life and her career. Because behind the breathtaking runway moments, there were storms quietly building. By the late 90s and early 2000s, Stella Tennant had secured her place at the very top of the fashion world. Chanel, Versace, McQueen, her name was attached to the biggest brands. Magazine covers kept coming, and her reputation as the cool aristocrat of the runway only grew stronger. But here's the thing, Stella Tennant never let that fame define her. On the runway, she was icy, mysterious, unforgettable. In her real life, she was something else entirely. Even at the height of her career, Stella prioritized her private life. In 1999, she married French photographer David Lasnet, and together they had 4 children. Despite being one of the most famous models in the world, she chose to raise her kids quietly in the Scottish countryside, far from the flashing lights. In interviews, she often said, "For me, family is more important than my career." But you can probably guess the problem. In fashion, you don't just get to walk away from being a supermodel. Designers, magazines, and brands still wanted Stella. They still wanted to use her image, her aura, her aristocratic coolness. And she found herself stuck between two worlds, her family on one side, and the constant pull of fashion on the other. Imagine that tension for a second. On one hand, you're Chanel's muse, the face Karl Lagerfeld can't stop calling back. On the other, you're a mom of 4 who just wants a quiet life. Can you really balance those two lives? In the mid-2000s, Stella stepped back. She focused on her children and her home in Scotland, tending to her garden, working on art projects, and living as simply as she could. But fashion never let her go entirely. She made selective returns in the 2010s. One of her most memorable appearances was at the 2012 London Olympics opening ceremony, where she walked alongside Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss, and Lily Cole, representing Britain's most iconic models. Seeing her back in the spotlight reminded everyone that she still carried that cold, aristocratic elegance like no one else. But for Stella, these comebacks were more like nostalgia than ambition. Fashion was no longer her priority. Behind the curtain, though, things weren't as graceful. Stella had struggled with depression for many years. Her quiet, introverted nature had always been part of who she was, but over time it deepened into something heavier. Friends described her as sensitive, sometimes too sensitive. Outwardly, she appeared strong, stoic, untouchable. Inwardly, she was fighting battles no one could see. By 2020, with the pandemic shutting down much of the fashion world, Stella became even more isolated. The runways stopped, the shows were canceled, and like everyone else, she stayed at home. But that solitude only intensified her inner struggles. In December 2020, just 5 days after her 50th birthday, Stella Tennant took her own life. Her family's statement was brief and heartbreaking. Stella had been unwell for some time. She was battling mental health issues. Those words were enough to show the truth that behind the image of aristocratic beauty and fashion icon stood a fragile human being who had been hurting for years. Her death shocked the fashion world. Karl Lagerfeld had passed away in 2019, and now, just a year later, it felt like Stella's story closed in a haunting echo of his absence. Designers, magazines, and fellow models paid tribute. Vogue called her timeless elegance personified. Chanel released a statement. Working with Stella was a privilege, but maybe the most powerful reactions came from her fans. On social media, people posted her photos with captions like, "No matter how strong someone looks, storms may still be raging inside." And isn't that the real tragedy? Fashion shines bright lights, but the people standing under them are just as vulnerable as anyone else. Stella Tennant proved that even icons can break. In our final chapter, we'll explore Stella Tennant's legacy. How she shaped fashion, how she's remembered in pop culture, and why her story still resonates today. Because some stories don't end with death, and Stella's is one of them. Stella Tennant's tragic death in 2020 left a mark on the fashion world that won't fade anytime soon. She wasn't just a supermodel, she was someone who reshaped the definition of beauty in the 1990s, bringing aristocratic elegance and minimalist cool into the spotlight. Her passing reminded us once again how fragile the people behind the glamour can really be. So, what exactly was Stella Tennant's legacy? First and foremost, she proved the power of difference in fashion. In the early 90s, the industry was obsessed with bold sex appeal and high-energy glamour. Naomi Campbell's fiery presence, Cindy Crawford's American allure, Claudia Schiffer's Barbie doll beauty, all of that dominated. And then Stella arrived, offering something entirely new, a cold, aristocratic elegance. She showed the world that beauty could also mean distance, restraint, and mystery. Fashion historians still point to Stella as one of the strongest voices of the 90s minimalism era. Her cropped hair, androgynous vibe, and cool detachment shaped the aesthetics of the decade. Plenty of younger models tried to copy her style, but no one could fully replicate her cool aristocrat aura. But her legacy wasn't only about the runway. Stella was also remembered for her devotion to her family. Think about it. Here was a supermodel at the height of her career, but she chose to step back, raise her 4 children in the Scottish countryside, and protect her private life. That choice itself sent a message that even when the spotlight is brightest, you can still choose to live on your own terms. After her death, tributes poured in from all over the fashion world. Designers and magazines called her the silent voice of elegance, and that was her magic. She didn't need to shout to be remembered. She left her mark with quiet strength. Pop culture hasn't forgotten her either. In every retrospective about the 1990s, her face still appears. In every documentary about Chanel, she is mentioned as the living embodiment of Karl Lagerfeld's vision of modern aristocracy. And for fans, Stella Tennant's tragic end became a powerful reminder about mental health. Many people shared her photos online with captions like, "No matter how strong someone looks, storms may still be raging inside," whether she wanted it or not. She became part of the conversation around mental health awareness. Imagine if Stella Tennant were alive today. Maybe she'd still walk an occasional Chanel runway. Maybe she'd mentor young models. Or maybe she'd continue living quietly with her family in the countryside. What seems certain is that she'd still be true to herself, because that was the thread that ran through her entire life. In the end, Stella Tennant's story is about more than modeling. It's about the double-edged sword of fame, the glamour it promises and the weight it hides. Her legacy is twofold. On one side, a timeless fashion icon. On the other, a tragic reminder of human fragility. Stella Tennant taught us something important. No matter how strong or flawless someone looks on the outside, true strength is often hidden deep within. And sometimes, even the most elegant souls carry silent storms.